Hi guys, I'm Rashonda. I'm the creator of this YouTube channel as well as the artbyro.com website where you can find over 200 art and drawing tutorials. In today's video, we're going to be looking at blackout poetry, or sometimes called found poetry. This is a really fun exercise. It helps with your creativity, and it's just something different to do, something fun. So if you're not sure what it is, stay tuned, check the video out. I hope you enjoy it. And don't forget to check out the description box. There's some goodies in there, as well as information on our course that's geared towards self-taught artists and helping you find the path for your own art journey. So go ahead and check out that. If you like the video, please give it a like and subscribe if you want to get notified of future videos. Now let's go ahead on over to the art studio and get started. I want to start out this video by explaining what blackout poetry is, or it's sometimes called found poems. But just in case you're not familiar with it, I'm assuming you're a little bit familiar or you wouldn't be watching this video, but maybe you just happened to click on the video, seen it in the list, and you were curious. So I do want to cover a little bit about what it is. Not complicated at all. There's tons and tons of different ways you can approach this. But basically what you do is you take some text from a book, and typically you would just pick a random text. And this comes from, and I don't recall the guy's name off the top of my head, but he did a book where he had an entire book and he went page by page and created a new story within the book, and then he decorated all the area around it. So what you do is you go through the text. Now normally you would pick just a random page or a random section and then try to find something within that. I've never attempted to do an entire book. I think that would be a huge project to undertake. It would feel very overwhelming for someone, I think, but they are fun to do, and you could always do it as an ongoing project that you work on bits and pieces at a time. But what I typically do is I will just tear the page out of the book, and I'll choose a random page and make the poem from there. So what you want to do is look for words that connect together to make a short poem. And the length could be longer, it could be shorter. You're limited to what's on the page, so you have to be able to connect them in an order in which it makes some sense. So you could kind of loop back around, but then you would need a way to bring the viewer's eye back around and down. So here's an example. This says, "He floated right down from the station." Not sure what that means, but those are the words that I came up with that I found in here. And then I just did the black around it and connected them that way. Even though they read like they would normally read, it's still kind of fun to connect them sometimes. In this one, this could be finished. I could call this completed. This is as basic as you can get pretty much. I suppose you could get a little more basic on here, but this is the kind of the minimum that you would do. This one, I blacked out everything else completely and did this little wasp thing here. This says, "Atmospheric explosions approaching. Black wasp was listening to his headset." I could add some headset in here. I could do some other things, but this is kind of another minimalist type of approach to it. Just blacking everything out with ink and leaving the letters exposed. And then I added an image to that one. And here's another one, kind of similar to this first one, but with some watercolor wash on the background. You can still see the text, but it's kind of toned out. You can't read it. It isn't as noticeable as leaving it this way. It says, "Her hero was not familiar with all her tinker toys." This one does not have any images on it. I could add some images, and that's typically what I do. So these examples are all done on a full page. But for the video today, for the tutorial, I'm going to be doing it on artist trading cards. So what I do for those is I take a full sheet of paper and I just cut them down to 3.5 by 5.5, or sorry, 2.5 by 3.5 inches. I cut them down, and usually what I'll do is I'll cut a bunch of them up, and then I'll look for one that looks like it's something that could be used. So this one, for example, probably wouldn't be the best one to try to use because there's a lot of negative space in here. There's not a lot of words to choose from, where some of these, same thing with this one, doesn't have a lot of words. So it'd make it a little bit more challenging. But one of the things that I do like about this is that it is challenging, and it pushes you to use your imagination and to go outside of your comfort zone a little bit. So today I'm going to be using the artist trading cards, and I will take you step by step through my process for how I do that. Well, the first step is to get everything ready. And so what I did first was I took a couple of different books and I ripped out a couple of random pages. And then the next thing's going to be to find the text for the poem within. So there's a couple different ways to do this. Since I'm doing mine on artist trading cards, I can scan through this and try to find some words that I want to use and then cut them down to size, or I can just cut them down and hope for the best, which is typically what I do. I like to go ahead and cut mine down ahead of time and then look through there to try to find some words that can connect and go together to make a short little poem. The difficult part with that is that you can cut them two different ways. You can do this portrait view or the landscape view, and it changes the section of words that you have in there. So if you're doing it random, then you lessen your chances of having a good group of words to put in there. But I like that personally because I like the challenge of trying to be creative and find something that can go together. So it's up to you. Also, if you want to do yours on the full page, that's fine too. Like I said though, I like doing mine on artist trading cards, so that's how I'm going to be doing this today. So that would be the next step, is I'm going to cut these down into 2.5 by 3.5 inch pieces. And then I also need to glue those to a heavier cardstock so they're not so thin, so that I can work on them for my artist trading cards. If you're not doing artist trading cards, you don't need to do that step. You can if you want to. You could mount this onto something a little more sturdy. That's up to you. It's not necessary. For artist trading cards, it is, because you want your cards to be nice and sturdy. So I'm going to cut these down. Then I'm going to choose which one I want to work with. I'm going to mount that onto a heavier piece of cardstock, and then it'll all be prepped and ready to go, and I will come back when I have those things finished. What I did was took 3 pages that I randomly ripped out of a couple of different books, and then I cut them down into my artist trading card size, which is 2.5 by 3.5, and some of them go long ways, some of them go this way. So then the next step is to find which page I want to use. I also have these other ones over here that I did a while ago that I cut out and never did anything with. So there's a couple different ways you can do this. And you can use the full sheet of paper. You can cut yours down to a different size. That doesn't really matter. But there's a couple different approaches. You can pick a page or pick a section of a page and work only with that one and just keep looking at it until you can figure out a poem that you can pull from the text. Or you can kind of look through all your different pieces and find one that you think is going to be a little bit easier and pick that one, or you can scan them ahead of time. So normally what you would want to do is get a pencil. Doesn't matter what kind, get any kind of pencil. You're just going to mark these. And what you would do is start looking through the text and start pulling out words or underlining, highlighting words that you think you could use. So when I scan through here, the word, I'll move these out of the way, the word church stands out to me. Maybe I can do something with that. And that doesn't mean I'm necessarily going to use that word. It just means that that word sticks out to me. Maybe I can use that. Church, believe, old, city. So you're just scanning for words. There's money. And I may use these words and maybe I'm not going to. It depends on, let me zoom in a little bit here, see if I can do this without shaking you around too much. You just want to look at these words that are in here, pick out some words that stand out to you. And this might take a little bit of time. You're trying to write some kind of short poem or somehow connect the words together in a way that makes a little bit of sense, at least, that they go together. So what you do is just keep looking, scanning back and forth, thinking about these words you have, and maybe you'll use these and maybe you won't. So I'm going to go ahead and pull some words from this text, and I'm not going to have you sit here with me while I figure all this out. If you're doing this on your own, this would be a good time for you to go ahead and start pulling out your words for your poem and yours. And I will be back when I have my poem pulled out. I'm finished pulling out my words here to make my poem. And believe it or not, in this small little piece of text, there were actually quite a few different options. So you just have to work through kind of back and forth and then decide on what words you want to go with. So the ones I decided on will read, I walked to the church and I didn't find redemption. So the next step would be to take an outliner pen or a marker or whatever you want to do to highlight where those words are. I'm going to use a black pen. You can simply circle them. You can draw boxes around them. You could do more of like bubbles. It's up to you. Jagged lines around it like little starbursts. However you want to highlight these words so they stand out among the other ones. And then the next step would be to decide what you want to do with the background. If you want the rest of the text to still be visible, if you want it blacked out completely, if you want it just muted a little bit where you can see it but it's not as noticeable. We can also draw some pictures in here. So for something like this, we might want to draw a church or a cross or some religious icon on here since it talks about a church and redemption. So these are all the things that we need to consider now before we move forward with our Blackout poetry. For this Blackout poetry, I think I will go ahead and outline the words. Like I said, you can do this a lot of different ways. I'm just going to do boxes around them with the black. And you can leave the outlining off altogether and just do your whatever your background is around it, and I'll show you an example of that in a minute. And you could do a different color as well. I'm just going to go ahead and do black, just boxing it out basically. And you can make your outlines or these boxes, you could make them bolder if you wanted to. It's just part of the overall look that you want to go for with your artwork. So it's just a style preference, a personal preference as an artist, how you want your background to look. So this is the first step, is deciding how you want this to look. And at this point, you should have at least a few ideas of what you're going to do in your background. So you can do images, or you could just block it out or black it out. You could just color it. You can make it as simple or as complex as you want. So you really could just take a colored pen or a marker or something and just do lines, like hatching or cross hatching with different colors through the background. Or you can have an actual image or images. And I will show you some examples of other artist trading cards I did. This one, I mounted the text onto black, so it makes a black border around it, and it says, "The rose could see her at the window." So I drew a rose in the background, and then I just blacked everything out with color, with pens, and just did these faded strokes with the pen. And that's similar to this, but colored, different colored pens. And then this one was done with markers, and the areas were filled in, where this one was done with more with individual lines. And it says, "He felt comfortable as he floated to the sudden tide of the room." So because it talked about tide, I put a wave in the background. You could have done maybe a room, different things you could do, somebody floating, however you want to do your background to go along with what the poem reads. So I'm going to keep working on this one. I'm going to go ahead and do my background, and I will do that as a time lapse, and I'll be back with you when I get that part finished. So that's it for the background. I decided to go with this nice bright fuchsia color and then purple in the background. One thing you'll notice is that when you're trying to draw your images over top of the text, it can get a little bit tricky. It is hard to see where your lines are when you're trying to do your drawing. So you have to just do the best you can and enjoy this process and have fun with it. It's a great way to work on your creativity. It's a wonderful creativity exercise. And that's about it for this video. So I hope you like this, and hopefully you feel inspired to create some of your own Blackout poetry art. And I will see you in the next one. Happy creating! Well, that's it for today's video. I sure hope you enjoyed it. And don't forget to give us a like if you do. It helps the channel out. And subscribe if you want to get notified of future videos. And don't forget to check out that description box and see if there's anything interesting for you in there. There's some freebies as well as that information on our course. And I will see you next time. Bye!